let's say leave it here, and let me open up the same software in my local machine. Again, once it's installed, click on this particular Visual Studio. Instead of 2019, you'll have 2022. That's the only change. And as and when it loads, you will see, you won't see this entire left hand side because this is something that I've been doing. You'll see all the right hand side out here telling that clone a repository, open a project or a solution, create a new project. I want to go ahead create a new project. As a developer, I want to go ahead say create a new project out here. And as and when I click on create a new project out here, it will load something known as project templates. Just like we have ARM templates, developers will have their own project templates out here. In my case, I want to create a project which is called ASP.NET Core Web App, meaning I want to develop a code called ASP.NET Core. I'll click on this one. I'll say next, and it'll ask me to select a folder. Select any random folder out here. In my case, I'll just go ahead and select this particular J folder out here. Just select folder, and I'll give a name to this particular project. The name something like demo web app 8 a.m. something like this. Some random name to my project, and I'll say next. And then it's asking me what kind of a framework you need. Do you need a .NET Core 3.1? Do you need, let's say, a .NET 5? Again, .NET 5 is out of support. .NET 3.1 is long-term support. So I'll just select .NET 3.1 and I'll say create this out. So I'm telling what is the name. I'm telling what is the kind of the project that I need to create. And then I'm going ahead and creating this out. And this is something that I am doing as a developer, not as a DevOps engineer. This is something that you probably will not do in your entire career as a DevOps engineer as such. And once this is done, I have my code ready. All you see here in the right hand side under something called as a solution explorer is the entire code. All the code out here. Again, when you are using Visual Studio for the very first time, you might not see this you might not see this particular thing called solution explorer at all. If you do not see it, don't panic. Just go to something called as view and just click on solution explorer. That's it. If you click on this one, you will be able to see that particular solution explorer out here. And here is where I see all my code. It says dependencies, it says properties, it says root, it says pages, it says app setting.json, program.cs, startup files, and a lot of things out here. CS, C sharp, and all these things. So a lot of files out here. Let me close this out. A lot of things out here is what I see in the right hand side of, let's say, my screen. And what I'm going to do right now is that I'll just open up the pages, and there is something called index.cs HTML page. Again, this is something that the Visual Studio program itself, let's say, gave me. It is telling me welcome, learn about more of Visual Studio and all these things out. I'll just edit this out and just give my own content under the paragraph. I'll just say this is a demo for .NET. And I'll save this out. So I am just doing a save. Again, all this code, if I just do a right click and open the file in the file explorer, all the code here is developed in a high level language. I just cannot copy all these things and do an FTP into that particular app service. The app service will not understand this at all. In the first place, the app service will not even understand this. It will simply fail understanding, telling that, you know what, I get an error and all that stuff. You get a lot of errors out here. If you are directly doing an FTP, you will have to first convert this particular high level language into low level language. I'm telling this is binaries, or in a very technical terminology, you can call them as DLLs. Binaries, DLLs, the same thing out here. And the process of conversion of a high level language to a low level language is called as BUILD, build. when a developer tells that, what, my code is not building, or this is the code build and all that stuff, it's nothing but he's trying to convert it from a high level language to a low level language out here. So how do I build my code? Is that I go here into my Visual Studio. Again, I don't have to do anything. Click on this button. Do a right click here, and here you have a list of options. Very first option you see what? Build. Just click on build. What it will do is that it's now telling build is started, and it's building this particular project called demo 8am, and it's now telling build is done. The code is now built. I built everything, and you can see the build file here, which is called same folder but bin debug.net core 3.1, and the file name is called demo webapp atm.dll. Let's open this out. Let's open this entire folder. Again, same folder out here, but you'll have to go inside bin, inside debug, and inside this one you will see something called as a demo atm.dll. This is your actual application file. If I click on this one, and if I just open this with, let's say, a notepad, just if I want to, let's say, see this, this is how it will look like. It is all a format that which a system can understand. You cannot understand this out. The same file was written something like this. Same file was just written something like this, but now the format got changed, and now this is in a system format which can only be interpreted by a particular server, and this particular process is called a build. The outcome of a build are DLL files, or you can also call them as binaries. All these are binaries. This is a format that you cannot really understand. This format is something that you cannot really understand. This is a format only which a system can understand, and I've used this particular, let's say, Visual Studio out here to go ahead and do a build. So I just did a build, and as and when I click a build, just telling, okay, fine, you know what, one is up to date. I know that the build is already done, so it's not doing any build out here. It's telling this is up to date and all that stuff. This is the process of build, guys. Is any questions still here?
Okay.
Anyone? Any questions still here?
Will we be using this Visual Studio also in real time? I mean, you said like
Visual
there is
Studio.
not much work, but I mean,
Go ahead, please.
yeah, I'm wondering, if we, is this really important or like we can, just take this as like a learning?
You can just take this as a learning. You're not going to
Okay.
use Visual Studio, but
Mm-hmm.
because the reason I'm telling this is because when we go into DevOps, you'll need to
Okay.
understand how a manual build is happening to understand, or to, let's say, appreciate the understanding of a continuous build. So we'll just
Okay.
have to understand the process of build and how a developer, let's say, go ahead and does a build out here and all these things.
So, is this where the developers are doing the Spring Boot applications?
Spring Boot applications, I would say yes, you can use Visual Studio to go ahead and do Spring Boot. Or
Okay.
the favorite, or let's say if you're using a Java, then developers would do a similar tool like Eclipse. There's something called
Okay.
Eclipse,
Yeah,
same like Visual Studio.
I'm aware with
Yes,
Eclipse and PyCharm, but
yes,
I'm just trying to understand because most of the times, if we are in DevOps, we will be interacting with developers and we will be resolving their issues.
correct,
Yeah, so I'm trying to get an idea of like where this stands because until
correct.
now
So
we are doing all Azure operations. Like something
correct,
related. We are writing code for like Azure like templates or like anything. We are
correct,
trying to populate things. But
correct.
this where does this stand? That is my question.
This stands in the shoes of a developer. Like I'm now inside the shoes of a developer. I am inside the
Okay.
local machine of a developer, and I'm, let's say, working as a developer right now. And I
Okay.
am telling the process of, let's say, a developer come admin, wherein I'm telling,
Mhm.
okay, fine, you know what, I am as a developer writing a code, and I build a code. The next thing is I'll do is I'll deploy my code. Till now, I did not use a word called deployment. I was using FTP and all these things out. Now I'm doing a deployment out here. So I'm developing and deploying my code out here. And just to give you an idea on how a code is developed, I'm just writing this out.
Okay. Okay.
But we as DevOps engineers, we don't do that. Yes, we definitely help developers
to, let's say, resolve the issues while the build is coming and all that stuff. We definitely help them out, but we just need to understand how it is done from, let's say, a perspective of a developer, so that we'll be in a better position to help the same thing out there. Yes, any more questions here? Okay, so build is done. I want to deploy this out. So what I'll do is, again, same using my Visual Studio. I'll do a right click. There's something called what? Publish. I'll hit this particular publish button. Now it's telling me what is the target that you want to publish. And I know my target is in Azure. It's a cloud. I'll say next. App service Windows. This is what I created. I'll say next. And initially, this is me. I signed in here. It'll initially ask you to sign in. It'll initially give you a page telling that give your ID and password. Once you give that, it is going to sign in into your Azure account. And once you are into your Azure account, I see what? Dev-rg, which is the resource group. Inside that, I have my web app. Again, when I said resource group was just like a folder, that's the reason Visual Studio is treating it as a folder out here, inside which I have this web app. I click on this and I'll say finish. And one additional thing that I'll do out here, again, very optional in nature, there is something called configuration. Just edit this out. And my web application already has some HTML code in there, right? Because using WinACP, I transferred all these things in here. Just say remove additional files at destination, so that you are doing a clean publishing out here. I'll say save. I'll say publish. So now what this is doing is that it's again doing a build. Publish again does a build internally. So it's saying, okay, fine, build is started. I'll build the code once again. And once the build is done, it's saying publishing has started. And now it is going into this particular folder. It said this is the build. And now it's saying this is the publishing that started. And now it's deleting all the existing files initially. All the initial files are, let's say, getting deleted. After that, it is adding the files. Just scroll down. It is now adding the directory and adding the files out here. And it is doing same thing, a transfer of your code from one destination to the other, but this is a better way of transferring your code. And finally, at the end of this one, it said publish succeeded. Web application is published succeeded out here. Finally, it's restarting your application. Whenever your code is deployed, application undergoes a restart. And here, okay, it's still loading from my cache, looks like. And here I now have, once I refresh, I now have a .NET application telling that home, privacy, and all these things out. And I have a welcome page, just a small, let's say a simple startup application out here. As a developer, I would like to go ahead and develop this more. Like, I'd like to go and add more functionality to it, more features to it, and all these things. But from a DevOps, let's say, perspective, we just need to understand how to develop a simple application. How do you publish this particular application manually? And if we are able to follow how do you do it manually, later when we start with the DevOps classes, all these basics will help you there to understand how do you, let's say, do it automatically. This is manual procedure, which is a build. And if I automate it, it is called as a continuous integration, CI pipelines, CI, CD, and all these things comes under DevOps. This is a replacement for FTP. I wouldn't say alternative. It's a replacement for FTP out here. A lot of people are not using FTP at all. Reason being, you're moving away from the HTML code coming into Java, Python, and all these things. And if it's Java, Python, you cannot do a direct FTP. You'll have to convert your code and then, let's say, go ahead and copy this out. So this is an alternative to FTP out here as such. Yes, any more questions here? Again, the same web application, I just changed this to something called as .NET out here, and I deployed this out. Now let's say I'm satisfied with this. I want to go for a version 2. As a developer, this is just the version 1 of my software. As a developer, the intention, or as a, let's say, organization, the intention is to increase, or let's say, to improve my product quality and move from one version to the other. If you look at any software, it works like that only. Let's say Android. You're not using Android 1, are you? You're using Android 11 or Android 12 right now. Same applies with Apple and all these things. They try to develop their code. For example, let's say I'm a developer and my organization is now telling me that, you know what, you need to develop your code. And as a developer, I just won't have these files. I'll have thousands of files. And this is just a sample. As a reason you're just seeing these many files out here. As a developer, if I want to increase my product, or if I want to increment my product from version 1 to version 2, I need to add multiple features in there, a lot of features. And finally, I'll just go ahead and I'll say this is version 2. This is the final change. I'm as a DevOps engineer, I'm just putting one change out here. Second, neutral. As a DevOps engineer, I'm just putting one change. But as a developer, to do this change, you'll at least take 3 months or a good amount of time, depending upon the product that you're developing out this. And once this change is done, we'll again do a build. And once the build is done, again publish it out. Whenever there's a change, we actually do a build out here to reflect that particular change out here. So just publish this out and I'll hit the publish button once again. So again, I'm doing a build and a publish. And this time around, this will go ahead and publish my version 2 out here or version 1, whatever that I've written there. So just give me a second. I'll just put my laptop in charging. So now it is going ahead and doing a build, doing a publish. And it's now telling the web app was published successfully and etc. And restarted my application. Now I have the version 2. Earlier it was version 1. And if you just refresh this particular page, you have a version 2 out here. Good enough. Version 2 is deployed on the cloud, and all the users now, whoever is using this particular URL, will be able to see the version 2. Now, after I deployed or after I released my version 2, my company is now telling me that, you know what, the version 2 that you released has a lot of issues. Can we go back to version 1? I'll say yes, definitely. But you need to allow me at least 15 days of time because I took 3 months of time from going from version 1 to version 2. You're now asking me to come back to version 1 back again. I'll need to undo all the changes that I did. But where is version 1 right now? Sorry, modified. It's overridden. Then where will I get the version 1 from? And I cannot tell my organization that, you know what, I cannot, or I cannot, let's say, come to my organization and tell, you know what, give me 15 days, I'll do the version 1. My organization will simply tell, or my client will simply tell, you know what, until then version 2 is not running. My business is at loss. What should I do now? How will you revert it back? And also, whenever you increment a version, whenever you deploy a version out here, your application gets restarted. Publish is successful and all that stuff. Your application gets restarted. Visual Studio automatically restarts your application out here, which will cause a downtime for you. Meaning, when it's restarted, it will take around 2 minutes for the application to come back again. So for that 2 minutes, your application is down. The intention is to go for something called as a zero downtime deployments. Meaning, the deployment should be agile in nature, that just in case if you are going from one version to the other, version 2 to version 3 or version 2 to version 4, if my organization is now telling me that, you know what, the update has failed, can you do a rollback? It's called as a rollback mechanism. Can you do a rollback? Your application should be agile enough to go back into the version 1 or the previous version as such. I cannot be taking 15 days or something like that. This is something that I cannot really take. I need to make sure that it is really quick. All these are called as zero downtimes. And I want to get some ideas before I go into the concepts. I want to hear from you all on how can we avoid this particular scenario wherein I deployed version 2, and since I deployed version 2, I probably did not test it fine, and now my client is complaining that version 2 is not working. And now if I want to go back to version 1, I have overridden my entire code. Now how do I avoid this particular scenario? If anyone can, give some inputs.
You can take backup before deploying version 2.
Backup, but I did not take that backup. Like in my
Yeah.
case, I did not really take a backup because I did not really, let's say,
Normally,
foresee this
like,
particular scenario.
hmm. No, generally what happens is whenever they're doing some changes, they take backup.
Mm. Correct, but I did not take a backup right now.
Okay.
Let's say, let's forget about backup for now because I've already done this. I cannot undo it right now because if I want to undo it again, I need a good amount of time. I don't have a backup. Then what should I have done? What are the other options that I can do here? Can I say that it would have been good if I would have tested this code better before I released it?
Yes, yes,
It would
yes.
have been, it would have been better if I would have tested it before I did a publish. But where will I test it? Another question. Anyone? Where do you think I should test it?
Like blue-green deployment?
Uh, I'm sorry.
Blue-green deployment?
Okay, blue-green deployment again. See, blue-green deployment is a concept. Yes, blue-green canary, rolling, and all are concepts. We'll talk about those. But let's say for now, I am not, let's say, looking at blue-green. I'll talk about what blue-green and all these things out are. I'm not looking at, let's say, that particular deployment strategy for now. There are two ways that you can test this code. You can, in the Visual Studio, there's something called IIS Express. If you click on this particular IIS Express, it will just test your code to see everything is working on your local machine. On one of the ports of your local machine, this application is being tested. You can see, you can test, you can take a lot of logs and all that stuff. Good enough. Again, if you want to stop the testing, you can just stop this out. Good enough, but not that great. Reason being, the code runs very differently on a local machine when compared to a cloud. It's very different. Code running on a local machine is not equal to code running on the cloud. My intention here is that if I can test my code on the cloud only before I publish it to the actual web app, this is my actual web app, and if I can create some random web app here on the cloud to test my code and then transfer my code into the actual web app, that would have been a good, let's say, procedure out here to follow. And is this possible? Can you achieve this? Yes, you can achieve this by using a concept called as deployment slots. That's what I'm getting into. This is the concept that I'm getting into for something called as deployment slots out here. Again, deployment slots are not supported in an F1 plan. You'll have to scale up yourself to an S1 or something like that to create a deployment slot. We'll talk about that. But before I get there, just say, just understand the theory of what are deployment slots really about. What really is deployment slots? What exactly do you get here? How do you add a slot here? What can you do with this particular slot is what I want you all to just read about. That's it. And then when swap happens, what is a swap and all these things? I just want you all to just type in deployment slots in Azure Web App. You will get this particular article. I just want you all to, let's say, read this particular article out here. Just want you all to read this particular article. And we'll look at this particular concept tomorrow. We'll do deployment slots. We'll do additional concepts tomorrow. But before I go there, I want you all to just understand the problem and just understand what really deployment slots are. And if time permits, just try this out using this documentation so that you're better equipped out here. So again, in today's session, I just want you all to, let's say, download this particular code, let's say Visual Studio Code out here so that you can try this out. Again, if you're not able to download it on your, let's say, machine, please download this on the virtual machine and you can delete the virtual machine later. So if you look at this, I have Visual Studio Code or I have Visual Studio out here in this particular machine. And this is the first boot, so it'll open up. This is how it'll look like. And the very first thing it'll tell, okay, fine, this Visual Studio and all that stuff. You can skip this for now. You can avoid sign in, and it'll ask you what kind of a theme you need, dark theme, light theme, and all that stuff. And you can start Visual Studio as such out here. So this is the first setup. So please set Visual Studio up. Just try to deploy the code out here and read about what do you mean by deployment slots in an Azure web app. We'll understand what this concept in tomorrow's session with a practical example on what really happens, how you can do a rollback, how you can do a swap, and all that stuff. Right? Anyone, any questions here? Okay, let's see. If devs are working on an existing project, can they download these files from Azure App Service and edit the code and publish it later? They can download. Normally, we do not allow the developers to go ahead and, let's say, download it directly from the Azure App Service. They do not have the privilege, or they do not really have the permissions. Just depends upon which project that you're working in. If your organization really allows it, if they have the access, yes, they can go ahead into the backend of this particular application and download the code out here as such. Yes, any more questions here? All right, thank you. Have a good day. We'll meet tomorrow. Please read this article before you're coming to tomorrow's session. Thanks, guys.